Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we?
Today's first encounter is a subscriber Dogman encounter. Hey Jeff, I have a follow-up to my encounter you narrated a couple of months ago. We recently went to my uncle's 50th birthday party at his house, and yeah, he still lives on the land in East Texas that my poppy and I had our auditory encounter on. While at the party and after a few drinks, someone mentioned how incredibly dark it was out there and how beautiful the stars were. My uncle's usual goofy and boisterous demeanor changed immediately. He said, yeah, I used to like going out there and stargazing, but not anymore. We asked him why, and he said we wouldn't believe him if he told us. I knew immediately he had seen that damn thing. I just looked at him and gently said, "What did you see, Unc?" There's some weird shit out there, and I guarantee you, I believe you. His light gray eyes began to well with tears as he lit a cigarette, muttering, "Fuck. Okay, here goes." He took a long drag and started off with, "Y'all know I drink. Y'all know I'm a fucking alcoholic, but I swear to God this happened. I'm not bullshitting. I may get drunk enough to call a bearded officer ma'am, but never, ever have I been so pissed drunk to hallucinate shit like this. Plus, I have proof. This happened, okay?" We all reassured him he was safe to tell us what happened. At the time, my dad piped up and said, "Brother, I remember you calling me when this happened. I know you're not lying." My uncle smiled a soft smile, took a drag off his cigarette, and said, "Thanks, brother." He shook the tears off his face and said, "Okay. So y'all know when I get hammered, I like to lie in my truck cab, listening to the radio and stargazing, right?" We all nodded. He continues, "One night about, 10 years ago now, I was out there, laid up with my feet on the door panel against the driver's side, my head against the passenger side, cocked back, just looking at the stars. It was just so damn beautiful." He paused, and I noticed he was visibly shaking. I'm lying there, smoking a cig, so the window's cracked about a quarter of the way down. So I'm lying there, singing like a fool, and all of a sudden, the entire truck shook. It shook like when you drop a ton of gravel in the bed of a truck. I knew the tailgate was open, so I immediately was like, what the fuck was that? I'm lying there, still as I can be, thinking one of you fuckers was messing with me. No sooner that crossed my mind, something jumped on 2 feet upon the cab truck. You hear me? 2 feet. So now I'm freaking the fuck out, and I don't know why. I'm sweating, shaking, and it was like every last ounce of goodness in the world was sucked right out, and all that was left was despair and pure terror. As my mind was trying to figure this shit out, I realized it's gotten dark in the truck. There was no moon, no stars, nothing. He pauses and tears stream down his face. He looks up and says, "It was looking right at me. The fucking thing was on top of the truck, leaned over, looking in the window at me." I pissed myself. I've been drinking all my life, and never, ever have I sobered up that fast. It was growling at me. I could feel it. My whole body shook as this thing leaned in closer and growled again. I could see spit dripping off its teeth, and fuck, it had red eyes. The most soulless, God-forsaken red eyes. It was a demon. I'm telling you, it was a fucking demon that showed up in the shape of a werewolf. There, I said it. It was a goddamn werewolf. He began to sob, and my dad put his arm around his little brother, hugging him and telling him it was okay. "You're safe, brother." My uncle, a man that had carried me in his arms as he ran for our lives into a cellar away from a tornado, the same man that used his body to shield me from a lightning strike that hit the barn not 50 yards from us, was reduced to rubble at the sight of this thing. I watched in silence as my dad and his other brother comforted their youngest brother and helped him gain his composure. It was a rather moving sight. These are 3 good old boys from Texas. They truly are a man's man, crass and burly, but in that moment they were all compassionate and gentle with their brother, who was clearly hurting. They just don't make men like that anymore. My uncle composed himself and finished his story. I screamed like I've never screamed before. Without even thinking, I'm screaming, "Jesus, help me, Jesus." The thing snorted or sneezed and looked pissed. That was when I knew I was dead. I had a 12 gauge in the floorboard, so I desperately searching for it with my right hand. Before I knew it, the damn thing jumped off the truck and bolted on 2 feet like a damn Olympian into the woods. I just sat there shaking. I don't even know for how long. I was terrified, too terrified to get out of the truck. I do know I sat there until the sun came up. I wasn't taking any chances with that thing. My 12 gauge would have been like a tummy tickle to this thing, so I really didn't want to have to engage it. "Kitten, you remember what happened to you and Dad in the old goat barn, right?" "Yeah, he saw the fucking thing. He's seen it many times, which is why he was always walking the fence line at night and would lose his mind if you or your brother was outside at night. That's why he started walking you all to the bus. One of the last things Dad told me before he died was, make sure them things don't get the babies." Points at my brother and myself, and then to my grown cousins. It has taken 22 years for me to have confirmation, but I now know without a doubt my granddad, dad, and uncles weren't messing around in the barn for fun. They were warding this thing off of our property by any means necessary. My poppy died in 2000, leaving us with a gaping hole in our heart and 1 man down on the surveillance team. Shortly after that, all of us moved off the property except my uncle and his wife. He says to this day he knows when that thing is around because even the wind goes silent. He won't leave his house, no matter what. When that happens, and frankly, I don't blame him. I don't know what these things are, but I agree with my uncle. They are demons in the flesh. This encounter scared my uncle, but it also rooted his faith in Christ again because he knows what the face of pure evil now looks like. Alright guys, I was not going to include the young lady's encounter that she was talking about in the beginning. But while I was reading this, her uncle's encounter, I thought back to hers and how absolutely an amazing encounter it was. Horrifying, but amazing. And it was all auditory. Her grandfather, Poppy, used to call her Kitten. And this is her story, so it'll make some sense to the people who haven't heard it. Anyhow, I'll give you the encounter now. It's definitely an auditory encounter, as we never saw the thing. When I was 10, my father and grandfather purchased 56 acres of land out in Texas, between Lake Fork and Lake Tawakoni. The land was purchased from a wheelchair-bound man whose wife took over tending to the farm with help of sharecroppers from Mexico. They lived in a little shack on the back 5 acres of land right next to a pond. We called it a lake house. My parents purchased a mobile home, but it wouldn't be here for a few months. My younger brother and I lived with our grandparents in an old pier and beam farmhouse for the remainder of the summer and into the beginning of the school year, so that we would be able to start school that year. Despite the farmhouse's dilapidated condition, it had a brand new, fully enclosed back porch that housed a washer, dryer, deep freezers, and storage units. There were 2 screen doors on the opposite ends of the porch. One led to the carport and the other out towards the goat yard and crop fields. I've always been an adventurous type of girl, so at 10, this place was my dream. My brother and I had a tree house. In every tree we could manage. We spent all our time when we weren't helping harvest crops, playing in the creek and the ponds on the property. The main road ran in front of our property. About a quarter mile down, there was a massive hill, with a bridge at the bottom of it going over the creek. Once you came up the other side of that hill, there was a sharp 90-degree curve that led you back out to the main highway. This was a gravel road, I should mention. At first, we liked to walk down the road and play in the creek. But then we started to notice how eerily quiet it was down there. And there was a feeling of being watched, and it was overwhelming. As the summer grew to a close and the sharecroppers moved off the land, the son of the sharecroppers told my brother and I about a young girl who was found slaughtered in the creek just a few weeks before my family purchased the farm. Her murderer was never found. That left us with an even more uneasy feeling. We began to notice how eerily silent and a feeling of being watched was happening down at the lake house, which is the shack on the pond that the sharecroppers used to live in. Actually, the feeling of being watched seemed to happen any time we were without adult supervision. One night, the goats and the chickens were making an awful ruckus. My grandpa had been told by some of the other local farmers that there was a massive cat snagging livestock from their herds. He immediately grabbed his .22 and told me to grab a flashlight. I obeyed, and we were out the door. Once we had cleared both gates that led out into the goat yard, things were silent, except for the sounds of the creaking floorboards of the hayloft above the goat barn. We could hear something huge walking around above our heads as we were approaching the barn. I think my grandfather felt the same feeling of dread that I did the closer we got. My grandfather leveled his weapon, and immediately there was a blood-curdling growl, howl, scream that came reverberating through our chests. I was frozen in place. My 10-year-old brain couldn't comprehend what we had just heard. My next memory is of my grandfather screaming at me in a tone of voice I had never heard before nor after this occasion. "Run, Kitten! Run! Run, Kitten!" Kitten was my nickname my grandparents called me. We both ran the 70 yards, jumped over the 2 gates back to the house in what felt like a lifetime. My grandfather would never tell me what he saw, but from that moment until he died 6 years later, he never wanted us to go outside alone at night. Like I said, we never saw the thing, but the feeling and the sound we got from this thing was otherworldly. We lost a few goats that year and began keeping the mama and the babies on the enclosed back porch for the first few weeks of their life in effort to keep them safe. Tonight's second encounter is a couple of encounters that I found that have something to do with the land between the lakes. Now, we all know what the land between the lakes are synonymous for, but this puts a little spin on things, makes it a little bit different. Anyway, here goes. The first incident was related by one gentleman who told me that when he was in high school, he would hang out at an old ice cream shop that used to be just east of Lake Berkeley Bridge. He told me that he was at the shop one evening after dark when two older women pulled into the parking lot and seemed very shaken and scared. Being a small town and wanting to offer help if they needed it, he asked if they were okay. At first they were reluctant to tell him what had happened, but eventually they related the events that had happened on their way back from Murray, Kentucky. They were heading through the land between the lakes and were nearing the overpass that goes over the Trace. They were talking and were just about to go over the overpass when something was in the middle of their lane. At first they couldn't see it clearly, but as they got closer they could see that it was a devil creature with wings and horns and red skin. They also related that this being had a pitchfork in its hand. By the time they got close enough to see it and determine what it was, they were right on top of it and about to hit it. The one lady related that they drove right through it and it disappeared. This event had scared these two old ladies, and they decided that stopping at an ice cream shop would be safe for them, and would give them a few minutes to calm their nerves. They waited a while and left on their way home. During the time of the second event, there were stirrings and tales related concerning a red-skinned winged creature that would swoop at passing cars on a particular stretch of road in the country. There was a gentleman who was heading home from work one evening and was approaching this stretch of road and had no idea that something scary was about to take place. As he came around the bend in the road and started to ascend a hill, there was a winged creature that swooped down at his vehicle. No doubt the man was scared and probably swerved to avoid the collision with the being as it flew across the hood of his vehicle. After it made its pass, he continued to drive home, where he recounted the story to his family. News of the event spread quickly within the community, and a group of men went back to the location in an attempt to hunt the creature down and kill it. Upon their arrival, there was no sign of the creature. Today's third encounter brings us to Lawrence County, Indiana, October of 1981. This sighting occurred in October of 1981. I had just been discharged from the Marine Corps. I was 21 years old at the time. I've lived in this area of Indiana all my life. I'm an avid hunter and outdoorsman with much experience. I'm a raccoon hunter. Also, I've been hunting at night by myself many times. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in late October. My sister and her boyfriend and his sister and myself went on a picnic at Spring Mill State Park. After the picnic, my sister's boyfriend and her went home. The other girl and myself decided to go out riding around in the country to enjoy the fall leaves. We were heading east of Bedford, Indiana, on a small gravel road near the airport. This road went to a small creek bottom by Leatherwood Creek. There was a thick forest on one side of the road and a cornfield on the other, surrounded by thick briars. We had crossed the bridge over Leatherwood Creek, and I pulled my 4x4 truck off the side of the road. We were heading east. I was looking down, adjusting the radio, when my companion stated someone was watching us. I looked up, and to my disbelief, I saw something standing in the middle of the road about 50 to 60 yards in front of us. This thing was at least 7 feet tall, standing upright. It was covered in long, dark gray and brown hair. I couldn't see its face. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My companion was terrified. I slowly removed my M1 carbine from its case and inserted a magazine. The creature continued to watch us closely. I opened the truck door and stepped out onto the road. I began to move slowly towards the creature. As I did, it turned and ran through the briars into the cornfield. I returned to the truck very shaken. I've never seen anything like this. My companion insisted that I take her home, which I did. We never went out again. I've often wondered why I didn't fire my weapon at this creature. I guess it looked somewhat human-like, and it made no threatening behavior. I never reported this incident because I figured no one would believe me anyway. Today's fourth and final encounter. A woman lives on a farm, and there's 100-acre parcel land that is owned by a neighbor that adjoins their property. She and her husband were maintaining the 100-acre parcel for their neighbor in exchange for the right to ride their horses on that property. One afternoon, she got a call from the neighbor, who sounded a bit frantic on the phone. He's an older gentleman who frequently hunted in the small patch of woods on the back of the 100 acres. He called and asked her if she had recently been riding her horse on the property, and she related that she had been not. He seemed relieved and began to relate the events of the morning. He had gone into the patch of woods on the back of the property and found a place to sit and call the turkeys on the edge of a small clearing that was maybe about 40 to 50 yards wide. He thought it would be a good place to try to lure an old Tom in, because he'd be able to see him coming from across the clearing. He had gotten into position, sat down, and decided to wait a bit before calling. He'd been sitting there for about 15-20 minutes when he heard the sound of something moving through the woods in the direction of the midpoint of the clearing. He related that at first glance it looked like a bear, down on all fours, walking into the clearing. He said it walked up maybe 15 yards into the clearing and stood up like a man. It looked around for a few seconds before it walked across the clearing on two legs and into the woods. The man left the woods soon after, and it went out of sight. He felt the need to warn her about his sighting of this creature. He suggested that she not ride in that area for a while. He didn't know what it was, but he was sure it wasn't a bear. He related that it walked like a man as it moved across the clearing, and that it shook him pretty bad because he didn't know what it was. When asked whether or not she had noticed anything out of the ordinary on their farm, and initially she said no. She then related that she was riding her horse on the back of the property one day, and there was nobody else on the property. She was coming up the hill, and out of nowhere, something large hit her in the back. Based on her reaction, I gather that the impact hurt, and she was also upset about mud getting all over her jacket. She related that she looked and could see it was a large softball-sized mud ball that had hit her right in the middle of the back. She said she looked around and tried to see who had thrown it at her, and was going to give him a piece of her mind. There was nobody there that she could see.
And there you have it, folks, this night-ending bonus. I do hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is treated with the respect that we all deserve, and that is all because of you, so thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Till next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.